She fired me, while the man she was sleeping with sat in my chair. Yeah, that's how my Monday started. The guy, Chad, didn't even stand up when I walked into the conference room. He just smiled like he'd been promoted instead of parachuted in through the back door. My name's Nate, 36 years old. I'd been with Argon Technologies for almost 8 years. Built the client ops department from nothing. Trained every person on that floor. And now I was standing there like an outsider, watching my own team nod along while Chad ran my meeting. Michelle, our department VP, stood beside him like this was all completely normal. We're rethinking the way we manage client strategy, she said with a smile so tight it could cut glass. Chad will be leading this new initiative, effective immediately. That was it. No acknowledgement. No thanks. No explanation. And no one, not one person, looked at me. Even Sarah, who I'd mentored for 3 years, kept her eyes on her notebook. That's when I felt it. That hollow, sinking gut drop you only get when it hits you all at once. This isn't temporary. This is permanent. The rest of the meeting is a blur. Chad butchered terms he clearly didn't understand. Michelle nodded along like he was delivering gospel. When it was over, I stood, numb, and Michelle waved me into her office. She closed the door behind me, sat down, folded her hands. Nate, I won't waste your time. The company's pivoting and your position is being eliminated. I stared at her. After 8 years? She didn't flinch. This isn't about tenure. It's about alignment. Alignment with what? I asked. Incompetence. Her jaw clenched. She didn't answer. Instead, she slid an envelope across the desk like a waitress handing off a bill. Severance terms. 2 weeks' pay and a pat on the back. But what she said next was the part that stuck. You always said you wanted a legacy here, she said, her tone as sweet as battery acid. Turns out, you'll be remembered for training Chad. That was the moment I nearly lost it. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. But something cracked inside me. Something that had held steady through years of late nights, tight deadlines, and saving clients from imploding contracts. And now it just snapped. Quietly, I stood up. You know what? I said. You're right. Michelle raised an eyebrow. About what? That I'll be remembered. I left without another word. I packed my office into a single box. Photos. A signed thank you card from a Fortune 100 client. The coffee mug Sarah gave me that said Operations Ninja. The room was silent, like everyone was waiting for a meltdown. But I didn't give them one. I walked out calm. Cold. But when I got home, I didn't even make it past the kitchen. I dropped the box on the counter and sat down at the table like my legs just quit working. My girlfriend, Eliza, stared at me across her mug of tea. What happened? She asked. She fired me, I said, the words sticking like glue in my throat. Chad's taking my job. Chad, she said. The strategic consultant with the frosted tips? I nodded. She fired you and gave your role to him? I didn't answer, but she already knew. Later that night, I got a text from Mark, our IT guy, the only person who ever told the truth in that place. Mark, heard something. You might want to sit down. I called him immediately. He hesitated. Word is, Michelle and Chad? They're together. Like together. The phone felt hot in my hand. You sure? I asked. I'm sure enough, he said. They came back from that Denver trip on the same flight. She billed it as separate. And someone from marketing saw them at her condo 2 weekends ago. Sunday morning. I didn't say anything. Not right away. Mark sighed. I'm sorry, man. I hung up. And I just sat there in the dark. So that was it. She didn't just fire me. She installed her boyfriend. Gave him my title. My team. My office. And the kicker? She made me train him for it. I remembered helping him polish his first slide deck. Giving him access to our pipeline dashboards. Answering his dumb questions with patience because I figured, naively, he was just new. What a joke. I barely slept that night. And when I did, I dreamed I was invisible. Standing in the middle of the office, yelling, and no one could hear me. That's how it felt. Like I didn't exist anymore. The next morning, I made a decision. No angry calls. No LinkedIn rants. No retaliation. I deleted my work contacts. Scrubbed my social media. Cleaned up my digital presence, so clean it was like I'd never existed. And then I started watching. Not just them. Everything. Michelle and Chad were going public. LinkedIn updates, congratulatory posts, corporate buzzwords flying like confetti. Michelle even made a post about rewarding bold innovation. Bold. Sure. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. I was just quiet, watching, and eventually, waiting. I didn't just grow a beard. I grew invisible. And when you're invisible, people say things they shouldn't. 3 days after Michelle fired me, I broke my lease, packed the essentials, and disappeared 2 towns over into a half-furnished one-bedroom that smelled like paint and dead ambition. I paid cash for the first 2 months. No forwarding address. No LinkedIn. No email signature. No trace. You'd think disappearing like that would feel like falling off a cliff. It didn't. It felt like standing on a high ledge and realizing no one ever looked up at you to begin with. At first, I did nothing. I let the silence wrap around me like insulation. No calls, no messages, except for Eliza, who texted every couple of days just to ask if I'd eaten or if I needed anything. She never pushed. She knew better than anyone that this wasn't about being sad. This was about figuring out what the hell to do when someone hands your life over to a stranger and calls it progress. After a week, I found a coffee shop near the edge of downtown, one of those half-empty places with soft jazz, good Wi-Fi, and a help wanted sign in the window. I applied the same day. The manager didn't ask for a resume. She just asked if I could run a register and not piss off the regulars. I nodded, tied on an apron, and started taking orders. At first, the job was exactly what I needed. Quiet, repetitive, invisible. I could spend hours steaming milk and watching people hustle through their routines, most of them glued to phones or laptops. But then I started paying closer attention. A few of the regulars wore consulting badges, companies I recognized from my old client database. One guy pitched a diagnostics merger over his oat milk latte. Another woman vented to her coworker about some new VP at Argonne who was screwing up onboarding timelines. I didn't say anything, but I heard everything. And every overheard detail? Intel. It wasn't just therapy anymore. It was reconnaissance. And then came the first real punch in the gut. I was scrolling through a public vendor portal one night. Just habit. Really, a muscle memory I hadn't killed off yet, when I saw a new case study posted by Argonne. The title read, Redefining Integration Timelines, a Client Success Story. My stomach dropped. The structure was mine. Every slide, every deliverable, even the sample budget model, they hadn't just lifted my format. They'd copy-pasted my exact words. The only name on it. Chad Nolan. I clicked through the PDF and laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was like watching someone wear your clothes, sleep in your bed, and still butcher your identity. They'd even reused the mock-up from my Holloway pitch. The one Michelle once said was too detailed for execs. Now it was the lead slide. They weren't just moving on. They were rewriting history, erasing me, using my work to prop up a puppet who didn't know the difference between a scope doc and a status brief. And the industry was eating it up. I slammed the laptop shut and paced the apartment like it had shrunk 2 sizes overnight. It wasn't just theft. It was identity fraud. That was the moment something changed. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was studying. I stopped looking backward and started tracking forward. By week 3, I had a burner email account, an alias LinkedIn, and a spreadsheet that only I could access. It tracked Argonne's client PR releases, contract renewals, and strategic partnerships. I flagged every account I'd built. Every one Michelle and Chad were now trying to manage without the actual relationship knowledge behind it. And I watched, carefully, for cracks. One afternoon, while wiping down a sticky table at the coffee shop, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in over a year. Nate? Holy sh**T, is that you? I turned, and there was Eric, partnership lead at Synapse Systems. We used to grab lunch twice a quarter to keep our renewals tight. He looked stunned. Dude, he said, laughing in disbelief. I thought you'd moved to Europe or something. Argonne told us you left to pursue personal ventures. What the hell happened? I shrugged, kept my tone neutral. Sometimes companies want change. Sometimes they just want someone cheaper. Eric raised an eyebrow. They replaced you with that guy, what's his name? Chad. Sharp dresser, but doesn't know your accounts like you did. There've been hiccups. That word, hiccups, was all I needed to hear. What kind of hiccups? I asked, casually folding a towel. Eric leaned in a little. Nothing huge yet, just off. Slow replies. Misaligned proposals. One client threatened to walk unless things got back to how they were. Honestly, I figured you were consulting behind the scenes. I shook my head. Nope. Been pouring coffee and staying out of it. Really? He asked, skeptical. That's a waste of talent, man. I smiled. Not if you're paying attention. He left 5 minutes later with a cappuccino and a furrowed brow. That night, I took out my notebook, the one I'd been using to jot thoughts between shifts, and flipped to a blank page. I drew 2 columns. On the left, accounts built on trust. On the right, people now faking that trust. I started mapping the web. Not to go back. Not to reclaim anything. Just to understand the pressure points. Because companies like Argonne don't collapse from explosions. They collapse from leaks. Quiet ones. Strategic ones. By the end of that week, I'd made a call. Just one. To a private investigator I knew from a client's compliance case years ago. I gave him 2 names, Michelle Talbot and Chad Nolan. Find out what you can, I said. No rush. I'm just curious. He paused. Curious enough to pay? I smiled. Curious enough to invest. The first Real crack appeared like most disasters do. Quietly, with no fanfare. Prometrix Biotech, one of Argonne's longest-standing partners, terminated their vendor agreement 3 months early. No press release. No loud complaint. Just a single line buried in an industry brief that said scope misalignment and leadership uncertainty. I reread it twice just to be sure. Prometrix was a legacy account, one I'd fought like hell to win and then kept happy through a product recall, a CFO change, and 2 competitive bids. And now they were gone. Cutting ties, citing confusion that didn't exist back when I was steering the ship. That night, I sat with a beer and read through my old project notes. Each bullet point felt like a ghost of a conversation I'd had, a relationship I'd nurtured. They hadn't just dropped Argonne. They'd erased a piece of my work. And the worst part? Chad wouldn't even understand what he lost. Because that kind of trust? You don't inherit it. You earn it. A few days later, I caught the first glimpse that Michelle's empire was wobbling from the inside. I was behind the counter at the cafe when Chad walked in. He didn't recognize me. Not with the beard, not in the apron, not without the badge of corporate identity. He ordered a triple espresso, heavy on the sugar, and took a call while waiting. He was agitated from the start, pacing in tight circles near the window, voice just low enough that he thought no one could hear. No, I told you we can't present that deck. It's outdated, he said into the phone, his jaw tight. Michelle said she'd review the new version. No, I don't know where she is right now. I've emailed 3 times. Look, if Veritable pulls the contract, we're both screwed. He was sweating, glancing toward the espresso machine like it owed him answers. Then his voice dropped to a near whisper. She's acting like she doesn't even know me. That was the moment. I felt it. Not glee, not satisfaction, but a deep, quiet confirmation. The cracks weren't rumors. They were real. He wasn't just fumbling. He was being iced out. The machine beeped. I handed him the cup. Our eyes met for half a second, and I kept my face blank. He looked away first. Later that week, Michelle published a new thought leadership post on LinkedIn. Something about transforming client operations through emotional intelligence. I clicked out of habit. 3rd paragraph in, my eyes froze. Client strategy is less about metrics and more about memory. That line was mine. She laughed when I said it, told me it sounded like something out of a self-help book. Now she was feeding it to investors like scripture. I stared at the screen, something burning low in my chest. She hadn't just stolen my job. She was selling me, my voice, my ideas, as her personal brand. I clicked the share button, not to repost, but to copy the link into a document labeled Misappropriation Evidence, Draft 1. By now, 3 different people had reached out to me privately. Some cautiously, some outright. A former junior PM who said she was thinking about leaving because everything's chaotic now. A client contact from Holloway who'd asked if I was consulting, off the record. And a compliance officer from a partner firm who mentioned, almost too casually, that Argonne's reporting had become inconsistent in the last quarter. That last one, I didn't just thank her. I sent her something back. Something she could use. When the private investigator's file landed in my inbox a few days later, I didn't open it right away. I made tea, closed the blinds, sat down with a legal pad, and then I opened the folder. The photos weren't blurry. They were high-res, time-stamped, mapped with GPS metadata that told a very specific story. Chad's car parked outside Michelle's condo at 11:43 p.m. on a Thursday. Michelle stepping out the next morning in workout clothes, coffee in hand. Chad leaving 15 minutes later in the same outfit he'd worn to a strategy offsite the previous day. This happened 5 times in 2 months. The kicker? Michelle's internal calendar listed her as traveling for 2 of those dates, implying she was nowhere near the city. I sat back, letting the weight of it settle. I always thought Michelle was calculating, but seeing those photos, I realized she wasn't clever. She was careless, and that's why she was going to fall. The PI also pulled cross-matched entries from her expense reports, ride shares booked within minutes of each other, meals coded as client dinners at places that don't take corporate cards. One restaurant popped up twice on Chad's social media, casual posts tagged late at night. Michelle never liked them, but she never hid them, either. She wasn't just having an affair. She was building her own blackmail material without realizing it, and it was going to cost her everything. By the end of that month, 3 more legacy accounts had dropped Argonne. Verital, Prometrix, and finally Holloway, the same account she once called Nate's Golden Goose. No announcement, no farewell posts, just sudden silence followed by vague updates about realigning client strategy. Inside my tracker document, I highlighted each loss in red and added notes. Mismanaged proposal, Chad missed handoff, new contact blocked renewal. Every one of them had once called me directly. Everyone had opted out. And still, Michelle kept posting. Her tone growing more desperate, the polish fading, captions growing longer. In one video clip, she was standing next to the CFO at a fundraising event, smiling like nothing was wrong. Except Chad wasn't in the photo. He wasn't in any of the recent ones. Just gone. Whatever was happening behind the scenes, Michelle wasn't fixing it. She was pretending it didn't exist. The final straw came when I got a message from an unknown number, no name, just a screenshot of a Slack thread from inside Argonne's client ops team. It read, "We need new SOPs for the Verital handoff. Chad's old ones are useless. Didn't those originate with Nate? LOL, yeah, but no one can find the originals. Ask Michelle. She says they were never formalized. That's a lie. I used them. Everyone did." It ended with a shrug emoji. That was the moment I knew it was time. The evidence was ready. The trail was clean. The names, dates, discrepancies, all airtight. And Michelle's husband? Well, let's just say he wasn't completely in the dark. A few pieces were already on his radar. All he needed was the right story, with receipts. And that story was about to arrive. I laughed. Not loud, not long. Just one of those ugly, involuntary sounds that slips out when your body reacts before your mind catches up. I hadn't planned on it. I wasn't trying to be smug. But there it was, right in front of me. A digital update from the Velocity conference. I wasn't subscribed to their newsletter anymore, but someone forwarded it with the subject line, "You'll want to see this." And there it was, Michelle's name, struck from the keynote panel she'd been bragging about since spring. Replaced by some VP from a consulting firm in Austin. Just like that, she vanished. And when I saw it, I laughed. Alone, at my kitchen table, red wine in hand. It wasn't joy. It wasn't closure. It was something else. Release, maybe. Relief with sharp edges. But the real blow didn't come from the conference. That was just the first wave. The real damage started 36 hours after the package landed on her husband's desk. A source, one of the 3 people inside Argonne who still had a conscience, told me what happened. She stared at the envelope for 20 minutes. They said, didn't open it right away. She just held it, like she already knew what was in there. I asked if her husband said anything. They said he didn't have to. He packed a bag the next morning and left a single post-it note on the fridge. "You buried yourself." Michelle called 3 people that night. Her husband, her board contact, and Chad. None of them picked up. The day after that, two major investors pulled out of Argon. Quietly, but deliberately. No press releases, just redirected capital. Three of Argon's oldest clients, ones I had brought in, built from scratch, scheduled emergency reviews with legal teams present. A PR assistant leaked the board's internal email. We are suspending Michelle Talbot from day-to-day operations pending an investigation into professional misconduct and ethical breaches. Chad's name was already gone from the org chart, but this made it official. He didn't just lose his position, he lost his entire digital footprint. LinkedIn scrubbed, company bios deleted. Last seen tagged in a blurry group photo at a rooftop mixer no one remembered attending. And Michelle? She tried to post one last time. A rambling caption about leadership under pressure and misinformation campaigns. It didn't land. Comments turned brutal within minutes. The post was gone by lunchtime. So was her profile. That week, Business Table Weekly ran a short segment on leadership scandals to watch, and Michelle's name clocked in at number 4. Just below the failed CEO of a bankrupt crypto firm. The podcast wasn't the end, it was just the match. The dry kind that lights a forest. The hosts didn't even mention me. They didn't need to. The leaked documents, SOPs that mirrored my originals, internal proposals with metadata tagging me as author, calendar overlap screenshots, spoke louder than I ever could. They painted a picture of a woman so desperate to rise. She stood on someone else's shoulders, then slept with the ladder. By the end of the month, Argon's site had been temporarily updated for maintenance. Which was corporate speak for, we have no idea how to explain this. Michelle was on leave. Chad was no longer with the company. Their entire leadership section was gone. I got an email a few days later from a Holloway Labs. Co-address. No greeting, no fanfare. Just a question. Are you open to consulting independently? We're reviewing vendors. Familiarity with our ecosystem would be a plus. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I replied, yes, happy to chat. Just one thing. This time, I'd like to use my real name. And here's the part no one asks about, the aftermath. The mornings after the storm when things go quiet again. The inbox calms down. The adrenaline fades. The world resets like nothing happened. Except it did. And if you knew where to look, you could see the outline of what used to be Michelle Talbot's career, scorched into the wall like a shadow after a fire. I never saw her again. She didn't reach out, didn't try to deny it. But a friend of a friend told me she's working freelance now. Corporate strategy advisor. No team, no platform, just a website and a recycled slogan. Helping companies turn chaos into clarity. That line, yeah, I wrote it. Back in 2019. It was part of a pitch she never understood. But I guess she kept the copy. Me? I've rebuilt. Not all at once. Not with vengeance in my chest, but piece by piece. I work smaller now, selective, deliberate. Eliza and I still grab coffee every week. She says I look different. Says I sound different. Lighter. Not happy, exactly, but freer. And I think that's the thing about revenge. People think it's fire and fury. But the best kind? The one they never see coming? It's cold, quiet, patient. It's watching someone build a throne out of stolen parts, then pulling one screw from the bottom and walking away. Sometimes, late at night, I still check the Velocity conference site. Not out of bitterness, just habit. The keynote panel tab? Still blank. The man she was sleeping with sat in my chair.